Welcome, I'm Tom Loucks, Communications Director, City of Marshfield. Thank you for joining us, and it's council preview time. And we have another common council meeting coming up on the 28th, that's a Tuesday. Today, sitting next to me is Steve Barg, our city administrator. We're going to review last night's, we say last night because we're taping this on Wednesday, April 22nd. We had an organizational meeting on the 21st at the Common Council Chambers over at City Hall. And Steve, our city administrator, is going to go through a few of those items that were of importance. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, Steve, and you can talk about what happened last night.
Yeah, as we continue through life in COVID-19 times, right? The world is different with social distancing and in this case now remote meetings for the council. The council did meet remotely on the 21st, as you said, Tom, and the first order of business was after some of the pleasantries, you know, with the oath of office and those kind of things. That was interesting remotely too. But was the appointment to the various council members of the committees, boards, and commissions. You know, people don't know this, but every year the council members are all appointed to be on different bodies. We usually have one person on each of the committees to be the liaison, and so those appointments were presented and made. And then after that was the reading by the mayor of certain appointments of citizens. Now, you hear us talking through the year, Tom, about how we want people to come forward and say they'd like to serve on historic preservation or park and recreation or something. And so we had some appointments made, a couple new people put on, and some other people reappointed. So that will not be final, though, until April 28th. That's when the council will actually vote on the citizen committees. And there was one that was talked about a little bit last night, an appointment to Police and Fire Commission. That may get some conversation again on the 28th. So we'll get to that when we talk about the meeting for this coming Tuesday. The next item that was talked about a little bit was the election of Common Council President was by unanimous vote for Tom Witzel to continue. So that went well. But the next big one, maybe we can touch on for a second, is this idea of giving business grants to our local companies. You know, people are hurting during COVID-19, and the mayor came up with this idea to reach out and provide grants to them to help get them through the tough times. What if you're running a downtown business and you can't even afford to make the rent payment, and you've got some other expenses and you just don't have revenue coming in? So his proposal was to provide, I think, $1,500 per business. And what the council decided after some discussion, Tom, was to refer this to our Economic Development Board. The board is really the arm of the council that was created back in, I think, 2013 to be the ones to look at these issues. They've got a pot of money, if you will, that they can appropriate toward economic development. And they're going to meet as soon as possible to look at possibly doing a program that would be beneficial to those hurting businesses.
All right, well, that'll be good information, and that would then hopefully get on. Would it possibly get on the council agenda?
It could. It could. I know Josh Miller, as we're taping this on the 22nd, Josh Miller, our Development Services Director, is trying to get a quorum together for a meeting even yet this week of the Economic Development Board. It's hard when you got multiple schedules to coordinate, but if we can do that, and if they make a recommendation, you may see that added to the April 28th council agenda.
Great.
The other item was an interesting one, overriding the mayor's veto on how committee and council meetings are held. There's been a discussion, probably the public doesn't know all this is going on, even though you've tried to keep them posted. But just as a quick recap, the council and committees need to meet to do city business. But as COVID-19 drags on, the question becomes, do we meet in person or do we meet remotely through technology, through Zoom, through conference calls, whatever? Well, on one hand, you say the state of Wisconsin, the governor's order exempts government. So we can certainly have meetings as we normally do in person. But then, you look at the spirit of it, which is really to try and do social distancing. And it seems like maybe that's not in compliance with the spirit. So we had a long conversation, and what came out of it is that the council meetings will likely be remote for the most part. And then the committees, they can make their choice. They can either meet in person or they can meet remotely. I think for both council and committee, what you'll see, Tom, going forward is you'll see some people in the council chambers and many others participating from remote sites, such as their home. So that was really the gist of what happened. A lot of times that organizational meeting that happens after the election is pretty short, 10 minutes. This one was a lot longer because of the issues I just mentioned.
Yeah, an hour and a half almost.
Yeah.
So, people again can tune in to our channel 991 as well as online to watch that meeting, which we did over Zoom. So it's available. You can watch it and listen to it and find out a little bit more about what's on those agenda points that just Steve mentioned. And then anything in closed session that happened last night you can mention?
Not really. There was no action item that came out in open session. It's really just discussion about whether the city would be interested in acquiring a small parcel of land, but there's nothing I can report at this time.
All right. Well, then let's jump into our council meeting that's coming up on the 28th. That's 2 in a row.
Yeah,
already.
I know. The 3 straight weeks, the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th, all remote.
Yeah, well, it'll be nice if sometime we can get back into what it was every 2 weeks, but, that's time to be see. Right?
Yeah, just like people's lives as they're listening to us, we just don't have control right now. We're all trying to do the best that we can under the circumstances.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about what's on the agenda. You have staff updates highlighted.
Yeah, I'm probably going to give an update on the staffing changes that have been implemented at every council meeting going forward now, every regular council meeting. We've done a couple things under COVID-19, Tom. The most noteworthy ones is our public works, streets, wastewater, and some parks employees have gone to a different schedule. And that started back on March 30th. They've broken into work teams, and the idea is they're trying to keep separate from one another so that if somebody, let's say, comes down with COVID-19, you don't have all the employees having been exposed. You have one work group. But the other group who works maybe later in the week, longer days, theoretically, if the building is sanitized and cleaned regularly, is not exposed. So they've done that, and the police department has done the same thing. Now, they've done something similar, I shouldn't say the exact same thing, where they've broken up into 3 groups, and they're trying to, again, work a schedule that keeps them away from one another, so if one person goes down, it's not likely that everybody's going to get sick. So I'm just going to give an update on how those are going. We're looking at really, with the Public Works one, we're looking at perhaps transitioning out of that schedule into a different kind of schedule that would also provide some social distancing, but I'll give an update on the 28th as to where all that stands.
All right, great. That'll be very beneficial. I'll just take a moment here to talk about our way of commenting. We still have this on the agenda. Item C, public comments. I'm just going to back it up for the staff update. Anybody who wants to participate can by phone. I'll give the number here so they have it, 715-207-0379. Myself will be on that line and then would transfer you in during public comment, and it would act the same way as if you were in person. The mayor would recognize you, and you'd state your first and last name, and I believe your address. Is that
Yes,
right?
correct.
And then you would have the floor and mention whatever you called about regarding public comment. So that's how that works.
Thank you so much for saying that, Tom. We want people to be able to view our meetings, hear our meetings, and participate. Obviously, this whole thing poses challenges. So if it's not seamless, we apologize. But we're not trying to use this as an opportunity to limit the input of our citizens. So thank you for noting that.
All righty. And again, like always, those meetings are recorded, so you can watch them any time of those common council meetings. Any questions, you can call that same number anytime, actually, and that goes to our public access department, which is our communications department. Let's talk about this first reading of an ordinance, something about temporary housing being presented by our city planner.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. This is a throwback to a conversation you and I had back around the first of the year, I think. It was brought to our attention that Airbnbs, and I'm going to talk about them, they're not the only short-term housing, but they're really a lot of the fuel that went into this conversation. That right now, if you look at being able to have that kind of short-term housing for visitors and stuff, there's only certain parts of the city you can have it. You need to get your property rezoned. You need to, have a hearing with the public coming for a conditional use permit. And the thought is, wait a minute, this is becoming a very popular thing across the country, so we want to make it easier. So I've got a memo in what I've given you today, and it's got the proposed regulations. I'm just going to touch on them. What we're looking at doing is dealing with this as a licensing issue rather than a zoning issue. So effectively, you can run short-term housing, an Airbnb kind of thing, out of anywhere in the city if you meet the following requirements. You need a license. You have to have a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces. There's some limits as to what signage you can put on, as far as depending upon where you are. You can have big signs necessarily in a residential area. The number of occupants must still comply with what the Uniform Dwelling Code says. You can't have, recreational vehicles, campers, all those kind of things in your driveway as a result of this. And they're for a 1-year period, subject to revisiting them when we renew. So if we get complaints and concerns and you come up for renewal, those may well be addressed. And there's more regulations than that, but really what we're trying to do is is get at the idea of allowing this. The minimum length of stay might be added later. That would be 3 days, but right now we're not proposing a minimum length of stay. It's really to make this type of thing that's getting so popular possible, and yet try to minimize any negative impacts on the neighborhood.
Is this happening here quite a bit in the city?
There are some, and I don't monitor this real close. I know that people in development services have seen, if you go on a certain map, and I don't know what website it is, Tom, but you'll find little dots around the Marshfield area, some in the city limits, some just outside of places that are doing it. And, they're not doing it intentionally to violate the law. They probably don't know what the law is right now. But we want to rope them into the whole thing. We want to make sure that we know who they are, they're licensed, they're operating within the rules, and they're paying room taxes, collecting and remitting room taxes. That's been one of the big things that the hotel owners have not been happy about for years, that these Airbnbs are not under the same expectations of room tax collection as they are. So once we get them licensed, we can really make sure we have a better handle on these types of issues.
Well, we have one of the largest medical facilities in the world, really.
Yeah.
Quite a big one. And I would think some people that come and visit may want to use an Airbnb.
Yeah, my wife and I have stayed at Airbnbs a lot, and it's much more, nothing against hotel rooms, but I mean, you have more space. It's kind of like being in a house or a larger area for a while. And like you said, people visiting, relatives who are being treated at the clinic. Sometimes even people who might be coming to be going to conferences and meetings at the clinic from out of town. It's a good opportunity for them.
You bet it is. Alrighty, well, there's some more things on the agenda and quite a few things, but I kind of will let you decide on what you want to kind of go over on that if you'd like.
Let's just go into a couple of human resources things that I'll just touch on briefly, Tom. Our Human Resources Director, Jennifer Aque, has been very busy. There's been a lot of changes. The whole Corona's, I can't think of it, FFCRA or whatever it is, Act, and it's not only is it providing benefits to employees of companies that need the extra leave or something, but it's also putting a lot of expectations on employers as far as how it has to be followed. So I did, by an emergency action that was given to me, the power back in March by the mayor and the council, I did initially approve policies number 3521 on emergency paid sick leave and 3528 on emergency family and medical leave. But now we've gotten some new information from the federal government, and we have to modify those plans. And they actually have to be retroactive to April 7th because they should have been in place then. So what is being proposed is to just make sure that we comply with federal law. I put them in your packet there, but I don't think we want to go through all the redlining. It's really to make sure that we're treating our employees the way that the federal law intended, and yet doing our required monitoring as an employer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely it does, and she definitely has a lot of work to do in this time, which has added more to her plate on top of what she already had. So, but that's a lot of the case with a lot of department heads with this COVID-19 happening. But yeah, she has a few things on here, and just talk about HR. I think we're still in the hiring process of other places. I know we just hired, I believe, someone in the fire
Department, under the fire. Yep, that all goes on.
Yeah, so it's a continuing process.
Yeah.
Gotta keep going with that, and they can do that online.
Yeah.
There's a job. I don't know if there's...
Exactly. Go on our website. It will tell you, I believe, at least you can click on to where you can see what the current job openings are. And yeah, COVID-19 doesn't stop us from going through the process of trying to replace people, hire new people, and keep the city's business moving forward.
And like mentioned earlier in our discussion, it'll be the various committees, boards, and commissions that are on the citizen side that's going to be discussed.
Right.
A little bit different than our committee, what are meant of council members.
Correct.
So that's going to be on the agenda on the 28th.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then next up, if I can just continue, is the seasonal pay, excuse me, that's easy for me to say, right? Seasonal pay schedule needs to be updated. We usually update it annually. Sometimes it doesn't need to be adjusted much in a given year, but if you look at what there's out there, there's everything from park and recreation people, people who work in the zoo, engineering interns. And we touch base periodically, Tom, with other cities, other employers to find out if we're competitive. So you might look up one year and say, well, we're paying lifeguards, X amount of money, and then we find out from people in Wisconsin Rapids, Stevens Point, Wausau, and other places that we've fallen behind, which maybe is why I'm making this up, but maybe that's why we're falling behind in getting applicants for lifeguards. So we want to take a look at our seasonal people to make sure they're being treated fairly, bump up those salaries as necessary to hopefully get and keep quality people. And Jen's proposal is looking to increase a few of those based upon, I imagine, what she's seeing elsewhere in terms of commensurate pay rates.
All right. Anything else, Steve, that you want to mention?
Not on that one. And I'm looking at an old copy of the schedule. I hope you've got a newer one. I don't have anything marked below that, but I've got items I want to cover if I can just go ahead. Okay. I want to talk about we have a columbarium project that we've been planning. And the columbarium is going to go into the city cemetery over at Hillside. And a columbarium is above ground means of storing urns and whatnot. And very popular. A lot of people looking to do that rather than to have grave sites. And so anyway, we're looking at building one that we think will probably sell out all the units within 5 to 10 years. But Justin Casperson, our Park and Recreation Director, who oversees the cemetery, it probably doesn't sound like, wait a minute, why is a recreation director overseeing the cemetery? But that was part of some staffing stuff we did before. He went out and got quotes or proposals for this, and he would like to have all bids rejected and get authority from the council to look at maybe redoing the specifications a little bit. The bids were not what we expected, and honestly, it kind of points apparently to us maybe wanting to look at how we laid out the expectations of a contractor. So we're asking the council to allow us to reject all the bids and look at ultimately rebidding that project in hopefully the next couple of months.
Okay, yeah, you don't ever hear that word columbarium.
No, I know. You hear that columbarium and you hear mausoleum, and there's a lot of the above ground stuff is becoming popular. And if you think about it, it makes sense in an age when land is getting more to be a premium, and so cemetery space is coveted, and so it's a good way for people to honor their loved ones and have above ground storage.
So the city, when I say we, own that cemetery?
Well,
how that works?
We do, but if you go out there and drive around and you look at how big the cemetery is, you maybe think it's all cities. It's a city, but also the Lutherans and Catholics also have portions of the cemetery that are theirs. And but we care for it all, and they pay their fair share of maintenance and upkeep. So it's really, the entire cemetery area, Tom, is maintained by the city of Marshfield.
Okay, so even though there's a budget, the budget includes their payment.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, they pay us for the continuing maintenance that we do on the property. I mean, it makes more sense than to have every one of us get our own maintenance person.
Is that our main cemetery here in the city?
Yeah, right across from the clinic, basically, in that area.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure what you have next. I mean, the next one I really have is the citizen appointments. And we talked about that a little bit again. We can touch on it some more. It's a good process. The mayor, finds people and brings them forward, and the council has 1 week to think about it. And if they have any questions, they can ask. You remember a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, we had a new policy that says that people on our committees are supposed to be city residents for the most part, unless there's a committee where we can't find somebody, or somebody applies from outside of the city limits who's got really the kind of specialized education, experience, background that we think would be really helpful for that committee. So there's a lot that goes into this before he brings his names forward, and I suspect the council will, approve the lion's share of them on Tuesday night, but they might have questions about one or more of them that we'll go through. And like I said, we mentioned one about a committee that came up last night in discussion. So, and then hopefully the council will ultimately approve a list of appointments. We'll get those people serving as of May 1st.
All right. Quite a few of them, or not too many?
New ones?
Yeah.
There's a handful. A lot of them are re-upping for another term. All the committees have terms like 3, 4, or 5 years, and so when their term is up, we find out if they want to continue, and oftentimes they're reappointed.
Will that be labeled in the council packet, or does that come up during the meeting at that time? These people.
The names are out there. The list that you have there, that colored list, and they'll be in the agenda packet for people. Just in general, citizens to look at. Okay. They can see who's on what committees, and I hope the citizens do look at it. That gives them a good idea of what committees are out there, because we're always looking for people who are interested.
Okay, great. And the next item that you would like to chat about here, Steve, that we're getting down to the end, but there might be something else here.
Yeah, I marked the two closed items, and you know, at this time as we're taping this, Tom, I'm not sure if both of these are going to be on the agenda, but if they're not on this agenda, they'll be on for, I would think, May 12th. And usually I don't talk about closed session very much because I can't. I mean, it's confidential. We're using state law to go behind closed doors for these discussions. But one of them, you know, a development agreement for a housing incentive project in the Prairie Run subdivision. If you remember back in the fall, Tom, we talked about we want to see more residential development. Well, developers are always saying, you know, the cost of infrastructure, putting in street and sewer and water and storm sewer, and then carrying that debt for a long time until the subdivision builds out, that's hard. That's hard for us to be able to finance. So the city came up with a little pot of money. I think we ended up putting $500,000 toward it in 2020 to help with that. So what we're doing in this development is we're looking at putting in the infrastructure, putting in the road for them basically, and then they will go ahead and try and get some lots built up for new houses. And so we're in closed session talking about what that agreement would look like. What's expected of the developer, what's expected of the city. It's way more than you'd ever realize. It's a multi-page document, and it's designed to make sure that everybody does their part and can be held to their part. So I'm hopeful that you'll see later this year this happen and maybe see some new roadway put in out in that area and see some new lots developing as a result.
All right.
And the other one, if I just go on?
Yeah, you please do.
This one has been controversial a little bit in the past, going before you were here, actually. And that is, there's a property at 8th and Hemlock, and the city owns it. It's across from the middle school, kind of across from Beal Stadium. And the city, one day we realized a couple of years ago, I think Justin Casperson brought it up, that why do we continue to own that property? It's used as informal parking for sporting events, football, soccer, whatever. And it's a dirt surface. But, you know, we've got the liability, we've got the maintenance. So we went out and tried to find, first of all, we asked if the school district was interested in buying it, and they weren't. I think at that time they were already beginning to talk about building the new football stadium off of Becker. So then we've been trying to find somebody who would buy it and maybe do something with it. So recently we went out and gave it to a realtor. The realtor's come up with a couple of ideas. And we're looking at signing on to one that would have a couple homes built there. And we're talking about the terms. In other words, what's the sale price? What's the confirmation about what you're going to build and how soon that development's going to take place? Because we want tax base, we want new homes. And again, those development agreements and the sale in this case as well of the property is predicated on you know, what we expect to get for what we're giving. So again, I'm just telling you the basis for going in closed session. I'm not telling you what the proposals are or what the dollars are. But I thought I'd mention those on this particular episode of Council Preview because those are items I can at least talk about the background because both of them have been discussed publicly in the past.
And I think you could mention, what is it zoned there? Is that different than normal residential?
No, I think it's some level of residential. You know, there's many categories of residential, yeah. SR2, SR3. I'm not, right now sitting here, I'm not sure which one it is, but the premise of the sale is that the buyer would build homes.
Right, they would be homes, and it would match the similar homes around the area. Is Beal Stadium is used yet today? It still is.
It still is, and there have been discussions in the past about, even with the campus master plan that the school district came up with, what's the traffic going to be? What's the parking need going to be? We can sell a piece of property that people are parking on now, and people can build homes there, and we could wash our hands and say, we're done, but you might get residents saying, well, no, wait a minute. Now I got cars in front of my house. Now we got more traffic problems. So, I mean, we go into this open-eyed, wide-eyed, but it does seem from what we're seeing that it's manageable and that our best interest is in getting rid of a piece of property that we really don't want to maintain anymore and getting some tax base and some housing development as a result.
Yeah, definitely. We're not using it. It was just a nice way to park back then, but now it's not really needed
Correct.
as much. And Beal Stadium that's not owned by the city. That's owned by
the school district. Yeah, yep. And you make a good point. So thank you for saying it. That they do continue to use that rather extensively. I think for middle school activities, you know, a soccer or whatever. So it continues to be an important recreation resource. But our parking issue is just why do we own a piece of property that is a liability and you know, it doesn't do anything for us.
Yep, definitely. All right. Well, that pushes us all the way to the end, unless you have more items.
No, it's been busy lately, and we're looking forward to another meeting for the third straight Tuesday, Tom. And it is good to be doing business again, even if it's remotely.
Yeah, so just when you say remotely, again, that has the option of both remote or in person. Can you just elaborate for our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, again, the governor's order is to try and keep social distancing. And so when we talk about these committees, you know, there's 5 people on the Board of Public Works. Well, some of those 5 might feel comfortable being in the council chambers. Others might say that they prefer, because of health reasons, to be at home. So it's still kind of a thing where the meetings will be conducted all remotely, but you may see indications that some of the members are in the council chambers. But again, as far as what you can do as a citizen to participate and to see the meetings, it's exactly, Tom, what you said before, and I know you're putting it out there as much as you can so people know how they can plug in.
That is correct. Well, thank you so much for stopping by here and doing the council preview.
Yeah.
Very helpful for people to get a sneak peek, shall I say, of what's going to happen on Tuesday without going into it that you can't. And I think people value that as well as our council, because I know they watch it, and it also helps them understand maybe a little bit more about what's going to be on the agenda, because the agenda isn't yet totally official.
Right. It still is tweaked after Wednesday, and so there may be changes. That's a good point. It feels a little different in here. Obviously, we're trying to keep distance ourselves. We're sitting several feet apart, but it's good to be back with you, Tom, and doing this program live.
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit different. That's why I'm not always looking at you. You're a little bit further away. But well, thanks again, Steve, for coming. I'll thank our viewers for watching Council Preview. And we'll be back again with Council Preview when we have another Common Council meeting. I say Common Council, I believe they say here Council, just a habit, but
yeah, whichever.
Thing. So thanks again for watching us. Tune in anytime on channel 991 or on our website at ci.marshfield.wi.us.